Our guest is someone who has not only shaped the private equity landscape, but has also played a crucial role in pioneering investments and strategies.
I ended up managing one of the first biofuel refineries. Transition from coming from engineering and tech side and going directly to private equity investment, hydrogen, carbon capture, direct air capture that you mentioned at the start. And we participate in these transitions or not? What is the ROI? How do we go about it? Blockchain, supercomputing, competitive advantages, which is very well known, right?
Right.
So if you are a startup,
Hello, everyone, and welcome to FaceTime with Leaders, a podcast series by Directors Institute, World Council of Directors. I am Rajesh Joshi, and in today's session, our guest is someone who has not only shaped the private equity landscape, but has also played a crucial role in pioneering investments and strategies. From driving transformative changes in businesses to contributing towards advancements in renewable energy sector, he has done it all. Currently serving as the managing partner for Arete Ventures, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Gaurav Shah to the podcast. Mr. Shah, welcome and thank you for joining us.
thank you, Rajesh, for having me here. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on this podcast.
Sure, sir. To start this discussion, after years of studying chemical engineering, you're now leading private equity investments and driving enterprise values. How did this journey in investment and business management evolve?
It's been an interesting start, Rajesh. You know, after my graduation in chemical engineering, my master's degree from USC Los Angeles, I moved up to Bay Area, San Jose, where I ended up managing one of the first biofuel refineries in San Francisco Bay Area region. You know, and then this is back in 2006 when I started. And fortunately, that venture business as a manager did quite well from operations and innovations that got the recognition and attention of reputed leaders, businesses, and even the state governments who loved it. Through events and networking, I ended up meeting a principal at private equity firm. As we know, Silicon Valley is full of venture capital, private equity investments, entrepreneurship. So I ended up meeting a principal at a private equity firm that wanted to explore opportunities in renewable energy space that was just getting started, right? And thus began my journey into an industry that I fancied about it, but knew almost nothing.
Okay. So, Mr. Shah, it's fascinating to hear about your journey from chemical engineering to leading private equity investments. Your fresh and valuable approach to the world of business management and investments are truly noteworthy. Moving on to the next question, knowledge can be communicated, but the same can't be said for experience. Reflecting on more than a decade of experience as an operating partner of Menlo Capital, San Francisco, how did this private equity experience shape your career to what it has evolved today?
Roller coaster to begin with. You know, it's never an easy transition from coming from engineering and tech side and going directly to private equity invest, as well as managing P&Ls and economics of the business, right? To drive growth and manage teams and all, right? Which is the thing that I gained since my beginning my professional career, right?
Right.
And moving into the PE side was altogether different, right? Gaining expertise beyond engineering and manufacturing was a very dynamic transaction and wasn't easy, right? Understanding the nuances of asset classes, M&A, working with law firms, acquiring, operating distressed assets, Chapter 7, Chapter 11, doing business turnaround, performance improvement, focusing on free cash flows, enterprise values, IRRs, and then eventually creating exit strategies that you are also accountable for. All of these were very dynamic, okay? As these KPIs differed significantly from one investment to another, right? At the same time, the underlying principles and strategies are too deep and intricate for a beginner that didn't even have a management degree in place, myself, right?
Right.
So perfect roller coaster, like I said, but eventually, if you are determined to learn, nothing can stop you, right? So I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the transition, though it was initially unsettling and bit tricky and challenging to manage, but I did that. And then eventually, I had to get up to the speed quickly, right? And in few months, fortunately, it all started making sense, but wasn't easy. You are constantly endeavoring for precision and thoroughness in your investment thesis, due diligence, acquisition process, competitive intelligence, market landscape, and so many other factors, right? That
Right.
require you to be sharp and focused because the margin of error is pretty small, right? It
Yes.
takes few years to make and target investments and jump into it. And unfortunately, the margin is very small, right?
Absolutely.
15 years and still counting. The key things that I learned, right?
Uh-huh.
Two key things that I learned. I mean, there are lots of things that I could say, but
Mm-hmm.
two key things that I learned from being in this space. It's been now 18 years and still counting.
Mm-hmm.
One is limitless learning, and second is multidimensional approach. I'll
Okay.
quantify a little bit on this. Markets, economies, and investments all are fluid in nature and dynamic. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't a fixed recipe or a template you could use over and over again, even if you become an expert in a particular sector and know things in and out. There isn't a fixed recipe, right? So,
Right.
so that's one. And you have to learn, and you have to learn pretty fast, right? From Federal Reserve's policies, economic cycles, sunrise, sunset sectors, structuring and opportunity, technology disruptions, being an early adopter or a late adopter,
Right.
strategies, competition, too many things to learn. And what I
Mm-hmm.
found from that is, never fixate yourself to what you can or what you want to learn, right? Be
Mm-hmm.
very open minded and always remember that it's going to add value sooner or later. So that's my limitless learning that I learned. And the second was multi-dimensional approach.
Okay.
What I mean by that is, it may seem little odd, but I don't know for sure, or I don't think learning is a one-dimensional thing in today's times, right? Now, let me elaborate. The general norm that we all accept is to have a specific skill set. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that gives helps you gain expertise as you grow with experience, right? We think
Right.
whatever we do, focus on one, learn, grow, and become an expert at that, right?
Right.
Which is reasonable. But what I actually discovered through my side of the world on professional experience is to have a multidimensional approach to learning. As an example,
Okay.
if you are from finance or management, MBA or finance side of the person,
Mm-hmm.
ideally you would think that all we have to do is key focus we have is, um, buy side investment skills, right? You want to be
Mm-hmm.
either on a buy side, sell side if you are in investment banking, but on private investments, venture capital, and all, you're rather on buy side. So the focus that we have on shaping my career trajectory is rather that I want to learn investment skills, which is valuations, modeling, M&A, deal structures, all these things, right?
Right.
Negotiations, working with the teams and all, and so on, right? And I don't know term sheets and other things. And I don't know if that knowledge itself is enough. And that is what I meant by one-dimensional approach.
Right.
I have
Right.
learned that not only you have to be good at investments, but you should also know how to drive those businesses. And see,
Mm.
to drive those businesses, you need to be good at understanding the underlying technologies, engineering, legal aspects, operations, talent acquisitions, P&L, how to drive growth, profits, and all. Um, does this negate the need of building teams? Absolutely not. You are as good as your team is, right? So you always want
Absolutely.
them. But the difference it makes is if you are knowledgeable and experienced enough in all the different organizations of the department, and if you
Mm-hmm.
set a vision towards the strategies for the growth of an entity, you are better able to guide the teams and you are better able to work in team collaboration and harmony, right? With this, you also set the bar and benchmark for what they have to accomplish, and then they
Mm-hmm.
could contribute, right? So this
Right.
particular approach, I find it unique. It's never easy to learn so many things, right? No doubts about it. It takes time, it takes efforts, and it takes experience as well. But I find that this particular approach of not just being one dimensional and multidimensional has opened my horizons of thinking and learning, right? Whether I have
Mm-hmm.
to learn on blockchain, quantum computing, tech, science, finance, markets, it doesn't restrict me from thinking that this is just not for me, right? Rather, I try to think what values could be created out of it, right? What can I learn that I could share with my teams, organizations, and help them transform or transition with every new technology or an opportunity that comes in my way. So I would say that these two have helped. And the third one,
Mm-hmm.
which I would rather probably discuss in some other questions if it comes up, but I'll say this: embrace constraints and failures. When you are investing and making large ticket size investments,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to be a plain vanilla play that you bought an asset, invested, and it's going to drive. No, it doesn't
Absolutely.
happen. More often than not, you buy into an asset investment and you realize that there was things that were missing in your due diligence. You get some
Right.
pleasant surprises and shocks, right? So
Right.
nothing is black and white. There are gray areas, right? So, and then
Absolutely.
when you learn those constraints, the key question that comes up is, um, I didn't plan for this. Now what do I do? Right? And I would rather think that what can I now do to overcome these hurdles? So there will be challenges, there will be constraints. Instead of trying to think someone else did it, try to think it's here and it's for me now to how to
Right.
manage. So I learned to embrace constraints and find opportunities from those constraints or challenges. So embracing them. The other parallel part that goes along with it is accepting failures. Private equity and venture capital, which I've been part of for 18, 20
Mm-hmm.
years now, they are risk assets
Right.
where failures are inevitable. We all know the startup ecosystem, right?
Right. Right.
Investors have even bigger risk with their portfolios and others. So accepting these failures instead of trying to put the blame on others, let's put it in a simple way, it helps you introspect what went wrong and the course correction. Right now, how do I correct it, which in turn helps you in the long run, right? Creating opportunities out of constraints and accepting failures is another aspect that I think is a part of my priceless invaluable learning that is here to stay with me for another 2 decades or so of my career.
Well, I'm sure it'll be there for a pretty much longer time than what you just mentioned,
I hope so.
because Mr. Shah, what I feel is that what you rightly pointed out, and what actually comes out of your discussion very strongly, is that you are a believer in owning up whatever actions that you have committed. So if you have gone ahead and done a merger or an acquisition, bought an asset, or whatever decision that you've taken, you're somebody who owns it up. Now that I believe puts you in a position where you can now say, okay, fine, this is what I have taken up, and now let me see how is it that I can make it work for the betterment of my client, or for myself, or whoever it is, the decision you've taken for. And that is fantastic. I mean, that approach, I believe, is really superb.
And Rajesh, you just brought up another point that just struck me, and thank you for that. Tasks versus responsibilities, right?
Right.
So if you think of your job as a task, you're only going to do what is being told to you. But if you think of your job as a responsibility, then you are going to be your own guiding force, right?
Of
You're
course,
going
of
to
course.
think, whatever surprises had to come my way, they have emerged. And if I'm taking responsibility and accountability, now it's for me to resolve them, right? Without trying to think and put the blame game, right? So yes, you're right. That should be probably the fourth point that I learned is acknowledging tasks and acknowledging versus responsibilities, right? And I would share this with all other leaders. I always like to believe that ask what you are contributing to the project first. Before asking the teams to create their goals and KPIs, right? And to do that, you have to be very accountable, very responsible, rather than just delegating tasks to others.
Completely agree. Completely agree. Mr. Shah, it is clear how those years have shaped your career. Your ability to leverage those experiences into your current role as managing director is certainly a testament to your dedication and strategic growth in the industry, I must say. That brings us to our next question. This is your 18th year in US renewable energy markets, which is pretty rare and interesting. How far have we traversed, and what lies ahead for the renewable sectors, especially with evolving technologies of direct air capture, carbon capture, energy storage, green hydrogen, as well as voluntary carbon markets.
Sure, it's fascinating, Rajesh. I've seen the renewable energy space evolve from its infancy in the early and mid 2000s
Mhm.
to the commercial stage that we are now at, right? The interest in renewable energy is accelerating largely because of, global warming, climate change, and then, US, Europe, and all countries are in together with the environment that we need to protect and preserve for future generations. And
Right.
I've seen that whole transition, right? And I also
Mhm.
learned from that transition what impacts the growth, what impacts the interest, whether it is government policies, incentives, mandates, carbon markets, right? Carbon
Mhm.
credits, subsidies, US, Europe, they both have their own net zero goals or decarbonization goals for 2040, 50, and those things, right? And
Right.
the journey in renewable energy that began from basic simple ethanol, biodiesel, bit of solar at the start, but at
Mhm.
those in those days, solar panels were very expensive. So then
Right.
renewable energy was rather called as alternative energy, okay? Because it was
Okay.
not a part of mainstream thing, and going green was leveraged by many businesses in the early 2000s, and that set the platform for further growth. But it wasn't a mainstream thing, right, for
Mhm.
businesses
Mhm.
to take that voluntary cause. And today, as that thing changed from alternative energy to main course energy, what started with biofuels has now become a fully blown space or a sector. Now renewable energy is an umbrella term, right? Renewable
Right.
energy
Right.
includes solar, wind, geothermal energies. It then includes biofuels. Now we are up with green hydrogen, carbon capture, direct air capture that you mentioned at the start. And uh, I have seen these technologies evolve, Rajesh. I have seen the investments, venture capital investments being in Silicon Valley also go sour, right? And that's one of the parts or challenges with innovation is what I've learned,
Mhm.
that innovation is less likely to succeed on first attempt. You look back 100, 200 years, and whether it is Nikola Tesla or Edison or Benjamin Graham, all of them had to go through multiple attempts before they succeed, right?
Right. Right.
And I have seen, and these technologies, I mean, I know some of these green hydrogen, carbon capture, direct air capture companies that were early pioneers, and unfortunately, they couldn't see the light of the day. But they set the benchmark, right?
Mhm.
Failures teach you a lesson that success never can. So we should always take failures as a learning curve, right?
Right.
Many
Right.
others benefited from it. And now where I see this is that after 10 to 12 years of sustained research and development efforts, government subsidies and grants, particularly in the last 4 years, has less to do with COVID, but post 2020, the acceleration in renewable energy, climate tech, ESG, and all has really increased, where it has become now a part of mainstream, right? Public
Right.
listed companies in US and Europe are mandated with scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions are on the horizon. So now decarbonization is not just a fancy word. And many of these technologies today, they are going to play a very bigger role in the future of decarbonization, right?
Mhm.
Decarbonization is going to be a mixture of reduction, avoidance, and removal, right? So
Okay.
there are different things, right? So when we are using electric vehicles, right? Lithium batteries, sodium, and now solid state batteries are on the horizon.
Correct.
Those things are reduction, right? Then there is avoidance, right? That if I could use solar energy, then I should probably consider avoiding the coal-based electricity from the grid, right? And removal
Right.
is where we have nature and forestry based projects where we are doing reforestation, afforestation, and all. So I think all these three together are needed for at least next 15, 20 years. Green hydrogen, speaking one-on-one with about them, green hydrogen certainly has come a long way from alkaline electrolyzers that we began the journey 7, 8 years back to now the markets are going towards proton exchange membranes, PEM, membranes-based electrolyzers, and now membrane-free electrolyzers are coming in.
Okay.
And all of these technologies are progressively what they are doing in simple words is bringing the cost of a product, in this case, green hydrogen, down. So from $12 to $15 a kg, we are now down to $6, $7, $8, depending on your volumes and scale. And as these
Okay.
innovation and technologies evolve, government loans, subsidies encourage this. The goal of bringing green hydrogen below $2 or $3 a kg, where it competes with our fossil-based hydrogen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Petroleum-based, which we call it as gray hydrogen as a terminology, that becomes very cost competitive. But this
Right.
journey between $7 to $2 or $3, governments are making it possible in US, Europe by offering subsidies as much as they can. Like in US, we have Inflation Reduction Act, which is providing the green hydrogen producers
Mm-hmm.
significant subsidies where they could probably still achieve $2 to $3 in and not create an impact on the markets, because consumers, green hydrogen is largely consumed by industries, right? Ammonia, fertilizer, oil and gas, steel, and all. You don't
Right.
want to create a pressure on these commodities and create an inflation. So government is stepping in to help the producers as well
Mm-hmm.
as the buyers, right? By keeping the price. And with that,
Correct.
government is also hoping that technologies will get more efficient, more better, and this will support. Same thing is with direct air capture. There are so many good companies, and Bill Gates and so many other investment firms have
Mm-hmm.
funded. It started with a per ton CO2 cost of $800, $1,200. Now they have achieved the cost down to $200 or so. And compare direct air capture based carbon dioxide capture with carbon capture, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
also now being deployed. Carbon capture has been around for 2 to 3 decades. ExxonMobil and some others have actually been using, but it wasn't widely deployed. But now
Right.
it is integral, where carbon capture could be done for less than $100 a ton now, right? So
Okay.
the bridge
Okay.
between direct air capture and carbon capture is slowly coming down. Now,
Okay.
this is not going to change overnight. See, we have been reliant on the fossil fuels for last 145, 150 odd years. So these kinds of energy transitions, as we call it today, as they take time and efforts. They won't happen overnight. So I think that direct air capture, green hydrogen, power to liquid, right?
Right.
E-fuels, carbon dioxide to fuels. All of these technologies are evolving. I do think that they still need probably, and it's just an approximation or a speculation, probably another 4 to 5 years before they start maturing and become cost competitive, right? But
Mm-hmm.
fortunately, investments, government supports will help us bridge that gap. So, no, I do see that green hydrogen, carbon capture, direct air capture being the agents of change in helping us towards transition, because carbon capture and direct air capture are reducing the emissions, right? So you
Right.
need them until and unless we completely shift to a green economy or a regenerative or sustainable circular economy, however we want to call that as. So that's the other side. Energy storage. I think the most critical component of energy transition or renewable energy. Today's problem that we have is not that whether it's India, US, China, Europe, the shortage is not of solar, wind, biofuels, or biomaterials and all, right? The
Right.
shortage rather lies in terms of energy storage. You
Storage.
don't get it when you need it. And if you have energy storage, grid storage, I do think that the potential for renewable energy to take more market share and substitute fossil fuels will become very high. And energy storage is a bit expensive, but fortunately, even in that, solid state flow batteries, graphene, lithium already can do a job. So many other healthy alternatives. I shouldn't say healthy, but so many other environmentally friendly alternatives are coming up that will help you support with that grid and energy storage, right? So that's one. Voluntary carbon markets, I've seen these markets literally evolve, right? So I've seen VCMs, or carbon offsets, as we call it, as from $100 million it was in 2014 or 15 approximately, to today more than a $2 billion market. And investment firms from Wall Street are now saying it has a potential to become a $10 billion market in the next five
Mm-hmm.
to eight, 10 years, right? So
Wow.
corporates are now using carbon offsets as a leverage to promote the environment decarbonization, while they also create their own internal plans. So I think the voluntary carbon markets are enabling these technologies, because if I'm a carbon capture company and I capture CO2, I could leverage, offset my operating costs by selling these carbon credits, right? So in many ways, they are encouraging these things. So I think VCMs are critical to the energy transition. At the same time, I do think that the markets have to be more regulated. They need to be more transparent and reliable. There have been issues with double counting, greenwashing, or overstating the claims. But just about a couple of months back, U.S. government just announced more regulations around it to make the markets more transparent for corporates, businesses, and climate tech stakeholders, so that they can trust on their investments and don't fall into any kind of manipulation or situations which would hurt the trust of the decision makers that want to really encourage renewable energy, right? So no, interesting times, and I do think that these technologies will only get better and better, and hopefully they quickly help us out with our energy transition and keep our 1.5-degree goal in place.
Superb, superb. That is as extensive as it can get, I believe. And
Thank you.
from what I understand, is one that there is this pressing need to do something about shifting to an alternative energy source or other alternative environment friendly energy sources. That is one part. But what you have very nicely elaborated, and I'm sure all our viewers are also really glued on and are enjoying this. Your
I hope
extensive.
so. I hope so, Rajesh. And you made a very good point, the government policies and acceptance, right? I think in 18 years, I have seen biofuels and started with that. And I have seen that there wasn't enough of marketplace demand, right? You had to create
Right.
a demand. And this is why these industries, for quite a bit of their initial time until 2018 or so, they could never really ramp up. They would never
Mhm.
accelerate, or investors would always be worried about the future. But with
Right.
governments creating mandates, policies in place, they created a stable market. So these companies knew that there would be buyer on the other side and acceptance, right? Not just at industrial level, but as a society, as consumers, as citizens, right? People are now looking, whether it is replacing plastic or being environmentally friendly in every possible way, right? I think that acceptance and government support is enabling this transition. And at the end of the day, the stakeholders or initial investors have to justify the means, right?
Right.
I don't think, and I still don't agree that we should take environment as a business transaction, because environment is who we are, right? So it's
Right. Right.
non-negotiable. But given that our whole economy relies entirely on it, it has to be done in an orderly fashion. You cannot just switch electricity off today or switch crude oil or coal off today, right? You have to be in that transition. I know it's taking time, but that's how it is.
Right. Right. So, Mr. Shah, your extensive experience in the US renewable energy markets is truly remarkable. And as mentioned earlier, I'm sure our viewers are taking notes. That brings us to our number four question. Leadership is rarely about titles, positions, or flowcharts, and more about one life influencing another. Throughout your 18 years of experience, what personal experiences do you think have most shaped your leadership philosophy?
Lot many. This is a great question, Rajesh. Lot many, because I think, you know, the era we are in, leaderships have a critical role to play, right? Today organizations speak a lot about upskilling, right?
Mhm.
Talent skilling, upgrading your skills that you have, whether it is Gen AI, quantum computing, blockchain, machine learning, whatnot, right? But I think that leaders have a bigger role, as I mentioned earlier, that when you make investments, you don't just delegate the teams, you take a responsibility and be experienced with what you are guiding them about, right? Rather than creating a learning channel, right? And
Right.
in the same way, I think leaders have a role to play. And personally, to me, what has shaped my leadership philosophy, number one, certainly experiences, right? So, but what were these experiences? Mentorship and guidance, I would say first. Embracing constraints, and I'm repeating
Mhm.
myself, I just mentioned it a few minutes earlier. Continuous learning, which also I went deep into, accepting failures and setbacks, and being agile and humble. While I've already covered few of them, I wanted to touch on mentorship and guidance and being agile and humble, right? So mentorship and guidance, what I mean by that is, I think, sorry, I think when you get to these kinds of leadership positions, or when you are making a decision of investments, which is quite a bit of things at stake, not just the capital, but other things at stake, um, you you do need to be open and flexible to advices, right? And advices at leadership level, I personally feel, are not as prominently available. You can have coaching and all to become a leader, but once you are a leader, I think maybe that creates an opportunity for some career coach and experts for leaders, right? But then what happens is, where does your mentorship guidance come from? It comes from fellow leaders and their experiences. It
Right.
comes from people that you work with, the GPs, general partners, limited partners, and all that have previous experiences managing investments and other things. And they always have some words of wisdom to share. And if you are receptive and open, they are even willing to train and guide. I will say, in my case, when I went from engineering to the directly to investments, my journey was only made possible by the general partner with whom I worked for such a long time. And having that faith, right, is important. And his mentorship, guidance, tutelage under his ages, I learned invaluable things, right? So that's one. And I think that should be an integral part where you are more receptive to new learnings. So I would say mentorship and guidance, certainly. And second, being agile and humble. What I mean by this, Rajesh, is, leadership has styles: dictatorial, transformative, democratic, collaborative, and all. And those styles could be defined by your past experiences and flavors, or what you believe in, or companies' uh, organizational approach or business approach also matters. Some companies are aggressive, some companies are trying to manage what they have, so you have to adapt in that. But more rather, what I would rather say in today's time, see, we speak about digital transformations for organizations. We speak about energy transition. We speak about business transformation for expanding into global markets. I think this is not just an isolated or a standalone situation.
Mhm.
Every business, every technology, if you look closely, Rajesh, is undergoing a transition and a transformation, right? If you think
Right.
about businesses, they have to do digital transformation. They have to look for new markets. Corporates have to now reinvest the free cash flows and capital back into new technologies. Google is just not a search company anymore, right?
Right. Right.
Reliance is not an energy company anymore, right? They all have been transitioning into new markets. Who are the people doing this? Leaders. So your leaders have to be transformational. They have to be agile. They have to realize that we are in an era that is now getting disrupted, whether it is business, technologies. Just look at it. Gen AI is not just forcing employees, but it is also forcing employers. Boardroom discussions are evolving. Should we participate in these transitions or not? What is the ROI? How do we go about it? Blockchain, supercomputing, healthcare, recombinant DNA technologies and drug deliveries, cell therapy, any sector, e-commerce, food tech, climate tech, clean tech, agri tech, all of them are undergoing a transition, whether it is about efficiency, creating more sustainable ecosystems, or just upgrading the businesses and organizations to become more competitive. These kinds of environments don't just demand you to follow what your organization or you are. These kinds of environments also dictate you or compels you to be transformational in your approach, that many a times change in your organization will begin with the leaders. If I
Right.
am as a leader, am telling my teams we need to create research on Gen AI's application, pharma, banking, whatever sector you are, right? Then
Right.
that begins with me, rather than me questioning an employee, should we be doing just Gen AI? Right? And this can only happen when you are looking into the economic cycles and transformations. The challenge, tricky part is, these kinds of transformations don't happen every 5 to 10 years. I mean, technology evolves, and we have seen last 20 years how IT and tech has evolved. But these are
Absolutely.
generational transformations, I believe, which will impact, or positively impact your ability to live, think, eat, drink. I mean, everything is about to change, right? Or it's
Yes.
already starting this transition. So I think leadership needs to be more transformational and open. If today I'm working on Gen AI or AI or whatever, that artificial general intelligence is on the horizon, right?
Right.
People are already
Right.
debating that. I need to remind myself as a leader that what I'm believing in today is certainly going to change in next 2 to 3 years, and I might have to come up with a new thing. I may not be in a position anymore where I could take a new technology approach and think, all right, I'm good for next 5, 10, 15 years. When these kinds of transformations happen, they don't happen overnight, and you have to upgrade and challenge yourself every time something new comes up. And it also requires wisdom to make sure that you are not being too fast and rapid. So it's a balancing act that you have to be, right? And this is what I mean by being agile and humble. you know if you have succeeded in one of these transitions and done well, try not to think that competition will not catch up. Try to think, what can I do next to stay ahead of the curve and keep my company organization always competitive? Yeah.
So, Mr. Shah, if I could, I mean, apart from all those insights that you have given about leadership philosophy, if I may say that what you're actually trying to tell all our listeners is that there is no victory line. If you have finished the race, that does not mean that the race has actually finished. It is just that you finished the race, because the race may still go on with at some other place, in some other area of business or any such area, because this transition process that is currently happening, and if I may say so, that we are actually in a process of transition wherein it is not over till it is over. So you just have to be at it all the time. Would I be wrong if I say that?
No, very well said, Rajesh. You summarized it very well, and I agree with you that the race is not over. Businesses, corporate businesses used to be static for quite some while, right? And that is where leadership practices are. See, as leaders, you are born out of circumstances and your experiences, right?
Right.
As a
Right.
leader, if I have been a leader for a manufacturing company for 2 decades, then I have learned things that I need to preserve, even if I go from one company to another, right? So that does bring a static approach, because that's how the past is. And that's what I was saying earlier too, that, transformation is not static. Year for the next 10, 15 years, until all these technologies evolve in any sector, pharma, tech, renewable energy, climate, doesn't matter, e-commerce, fintech, edtech, and all, these things are not going to stop, at least until a permanent solution, not a permanent solution, I should say, but rather an evolving situation gets plateaued in some ways, right? And for leaders, it's very important, just like you summarized it very well, Rajesh, is very important to think what next. Yeah. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mr. Shah, uh, getting on with this conversation to a slightly different topic. You have 6 patents across US and PCT in renewable energy to your name, which is impressive to say the least. How does intellectual property play a role in emerging technologies or sectors?
Rajesh, I'll start this with an example. Okay.
Mhm.
Google acquired Motorola in 2011 or so for $12.5 billion. All right.
Right.
Motorola by then had lost a significant market share to iPhone, Apple, and Samsung. Motorola, Blackberries used to be very good cell phone companies, but by 2011 and so they did not. The only reason Google acquired them was because of the intellectual property portfolio, which would help them go into the telecom sector. Clear acquisition, which was based, where valuation was based on intellectual property. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll give you another example. Just few weeks or couple of months before Facebook was going for its IPO,
Right.
Yahoo had sued Facebook for IP infringement, where Facebook realized that they don't even have the time, resources to defend it in the court. They ended up
Mhm.
settling it for hundreds of millions of dollars, realizing that this is a turf where we may not be able to stand. Why not we just give this a settlement, right?
Okay.
GM, General Motors, Apple, And many pharma companies have acquired businesses with just pure intellectual property acquisition that has a strong future potential, right? So what I'm trying to say is intellectual property plays a foundational role or an anchor role, whether you are a startup or you
Hmm.
are an established business, right? So, that itself just tells you how strongly I believe in intellectual property, right? Um, now, what intellectual property does, right? And in simple words, right? It
Hmm.
protects innovations, gives you competitive advantages, which is very well known, right?
Right, right,
Also, if you are a startup, it helps you attract investments and funding, right? It facilitates partnerships and collaborations. I have something that you may not. The,
right.
the recent example of this is a electric vehicle company in US called Rivian, which received a $5 billion investment from more than 100-year-old automotive company Volkswagen.
Hmm.
So Volkswagen said, look, you guys have something with electronic EV assemblies and infrastructure and cars that we don't. Why don't we join hands? The
Okay.
classic example, you have an intellectual property, and this just happened a couple of weeks back, 1 or 2 months back, probably in
Wow.
June or July 2024, as we speak on that, right? It generates revenues through licensing and royalties, right? Look into corporates. NVIDIA's patents and copyrights are almost worth $10 billion, right? Tesla
Mm.
has IP and all, which is $5 billion. CRISPR, which is into life sciences and therapeutics, gene editing, and all, they have
Hmm.
$10 billion worth of IP. Usually, intellectual property is considered as an intangible asset on finance and accounting balance sheet side.
Right,
Look into the kinds of values. These values are not 10, 20, $100 million. These acquisitions that General Motors, Apple, and so many other companies have done have been meaningful just to take it. Like the face recognition that we see in Apple, they had acquired a startup, just realizing the technology that they have built, and they thought if we accelerate it into our side of the world with iPhones, we know how to create values out of these markets, right? So there is a
right.
focus to that. Stripe, SpaceX, Moderna, the maker of COVID-19 vaccines, they have
Correct.
strong intellectual property portfolios. Palantir, Snowflake, so many others, right? So no, I truly think that intellectual property plays a bigger role, and especially if you are creating new technologies, it plays even more. If you are looking to raise capital, investors do want to make sure that if they are writing big ticket checks, Series A, B, C, and so on, running into hundreds of millions of dollars, that your intellectual property acts as sort of a barrier to entry for the competition and market does not catch up, right?
Yes,
The
yes.
patents I built and the ones that you referenced to was also part of investment that I had raised from my own invention. And for
Okay.
them, it was like, Gaurav, you're focusing on waste to biofuels and energy and all. And this was
Uh-huh.
12, 15 years back when I was saying that the real value in energy is not from food, it is from waste. Food, by food, I mean agricultural sources, right? Biofuels
Right.
have long relied on agricultural land, soybean, corn, canola. And I said, look, they need to be diverted towards food. We have almost, 7 billion, 7.5 billion people to feed all over the world, 745, 750 crores. And I said, land is getting challenging, climate is getting more challenging. And
Right.
on the other side, we have a problem of plenty of waste, right?
Yes.
Municipal solid facilities, waste, plastics, microplastics, ocean. Why not we find technologies that address real world problems and create innovations that are sustainable as well, right? And then the obvious question was, Gaurav, how do we secure these innovations? So I truly believe in it, Rajesh, and I think it is something that I encourage everyone to think about.
Superb, sir. Superb. Fantastic. Mr. Shah, your thoughts on the role of intellectual property in emerging technologies highlight the importance of innovation and strategic thinking in today's competitive landscape. I mean, who would have thought that an item on the balance sheet would actually mean something than just being there about 20, 25 years back? And not just mean something, would actually get some money for you also.
Absolutely. And
Uh,
Rajesh, mind you that the intellectual property usually goes under intangible assets, right? So,
right.
those things are always in terms of valuations more debatable. But, it's as a buyer or an investor, creating values requires a deep focus, right? So, and I'm really glad in many ways that tech companies, corporates, businesses, startups, they all are valuing innovation that that is more sustainable, right? They are encouraging innovation with corporates putting that focus. They are encouraging people to innovate more, to compete well, right? So, Rajesh, you are pretty right that nobody would have thought 20 years back that intangible assets can be so fluid and volatile. But when you make reusable rockets, those intangible assets also turn tangible, right? I'm referring to SpaceX, that Elon Musk has very unique concepts that he wants to reuse rockets, and he wants
Absolutely.
people to have multiplanar Moon, Mars, Jupiter, I don't know, go back, go there and come back and land safely, right? Rather than a
Yes.
single use rocket. So, yes, values that are created from intellectual property and intangible assets, that's something we all should learn.
Amazing, amazing. Something really unthinkable, I believe, is happening. I mean, unthinkable from a point of view of, say, maybe somebody born in 1990s or somebody who was in 1990s wouldn't have even thought about all of these things, I'm sure.
And this is why, as I mentioned earlier, Rajesh, that leadership really needs to be transformational and agile. A change in a
Absolutely.
company begins with the leader first and team member afterwards, is what I firmly believe in.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mr. Shah, that brings us to our next question. You've been involved in diverse investments from renewable energy to blockchain, quantum computing, AI, generative AI, if I may say so, and even the metaverse, all of which carry inherent risks and require a deep understanding. Given the rapid evolution of these technologies, how are they currently performing in terms of investments and commercialization?
Very, very good question, Rajesh. And I think in today's times, it's a conundrum or a dilemma for board members, right? That so many technologies are evolving in multiple directions, right? How much can we afford to invest capital into, and what kind
Mhm.
of tangible returns or ROI can we rely on, right? And and these things are not just technologies. I would rather call them as disruptive technologies. They are not
Right.
just improving things, they are drastically changing how we live, think, eat, and so on, right? Affecting, improving our lifestyles for good reasons as well. And I'll start with, so renewable energy obviously has gone through the test of its time. Last 10, 15 years, the industry tried to survive, stabilize, innovate, and now they are getting to commercialization like we discussed, right? Biofuels, carbon capture, direct
Right.
capture.
Right.
Today, direct ocean capture, ocean alkalinity is also emerging as a major pathway for carbon dioxide sequestration, right? So many things are evolving. And on the other side, blockchain, quantum computing. Some of the companies and businesses have really channeled their um, strategic focus in how they want to leverage these technologies quite well, right? Some of them have really done great. I'll give you a
Hmm.
very simple example. People question, right, that Mark Zuckerberg is currently has invested more than, I don't know, probably 20 to $40 billion in metaverse, which is
Hmm.
3, 4 years away. And people question that, is it going to just stay confined to gaming, augmented reality, virtual reality? And I tell them no. I said, dig deeper. A very famous German automobile company has actually built a EV platform utilizing metaverse.
Hmm.
They were actually able to build a assembly line and a platform, simulate it in the metaverse, and see what changes, challenges would be needed. A very,
Wow.
very another innovative German engineering company, very well known, has used it in one of their manufacturing plants, big manufacturing plants in China.
Hmm.
So, and it has helped them avoid those challenges and issues. Say you, as an example, you build a large football stadium, right? Or you build a large commercial real estate offices. And sometimes it happens that after a building is built, stadium or anything, manufacturing,
Hmm.
you realize that there is a small change to be made. But because the construct is already done, the cost will be humongous to do it. And now you have to create some, I don't know, temporary management things, right? Because you cannot
Right.
bring
Right. Right.
everything down. What if in metaverse you are able to see that, optimize it, change it before building the real world? So when people say that Gaurav, metaverse, Web3, these probably seem like fancy tools or more than what we want, right? Sometimes we debate a lot, good to have versus must have. And I
Right.
tell them that metaverse is not just good to have because it helps gaming and virtual world and augmented world, but I think it is must have for businesses also if we understand the applications, right? And businesses are ramping up, right? The same thing in metaverse belongs to another example that I could give is of Nike. They have generated probably billions of dollars through metaverse, right? Gucci, Armani, and many others have also created their own metaverse and they are monetizing it. Okay,
Right.
monetizing it. Quantum computing. I think that pharma companies benefit a lot. Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, they have invested in quantum computing companies, and Psi Quantum is one of the world's biggest, better known quantum computing companies. It got $450 million and is very closely tracked by people alike. And so, no, these technologies, companies, investments are accelerating. Again, as any technology evolves, it's going to go through its evolutionary curve, right? Which is a learning curve, which is far from being perfect. As leaders, you have to just overcome those imperfections and find a way out. SpaceX, right? Elon Musk tried so many times to launch rockets and they failed. And SpaceX has been around since 2002 or 2003. He actually diverted the investments from the money he made by selling PayPal. So, but
Right.
after 20 years, it's coming to reality. Just imagine the learnings, evolutions. In the last 5, 8 years since it came into the limelight, we are seeing how many challenges he has had with his Falcon, which is their rocket series, right? And all, but he did not give up. So I think there will be a learning curve, but I also think that if you are um, uh, patient enough and capable enough to strategize, the early pioneers tend to create forever entities. The benefits, the returns on investments are not linear, they are exponential if you are able to channelize it. So I think these technologies have a risk, right? You require a deeper understanding. You cannot just go through a case study or white paper to determine that this is it, this is what I want to do. You need internal research teams that will be able to deep dive, understand it, and then make a decision call.
Wow. Mr. Shah, your involvement in such a diverse range of emerging technologies is quite remarkable. It was quite fascinating to hear your perspective on how these technologies are currently performing from both an investment and commercialization standpoint. Given your expertise, how do you envision balancing the opportunities and challenges posed by generative AI in the future of intellectual property protection?
Very good question, Rajesh. And it's something that we as people, leaders, however you want to call that as, constantly think about it. All these technologies have risks and rewards. With AI, there is data privacy and ethical concerns of misuse and all, right? Quantum computing has it, blockchain has it. There are concerns, right? With Gen AI, there are many concerns, but intellectual property is definitely one. I think the future of IP, intellectual property protection, in this Gen AI era that we have just stepped into, um, will require a careful balancing act between fostering innovation and protecting the rights of the creators. Okay, legal frameworks will need to evolve to address the unique challenges posed by AI, while businesses and policymakers will have to work together to ensure that IP protection remains robust and fair in the age of AI-driven creativity. Let's call it that way, right? The opportunities are significant, and challenges are even more significant because they stem from the opportunities. So the opportunities are enhanced intellectual property creation, right? Rapid
Right.
innovation. To give you an example, generative AI can automate the creation of designs and even inventions, right? It can reduce the time and all, right? Like pharma companies can benefit a lot with it in the new screening of chemicals and drug molecules. It helps, and they are investing a lot into it, right? So
Right.
this could lead into surge in patentable ideas because yeah, now you reduce the journey to invention and commercialization, right? Customization is doable. Improved IP management, right? Enhanced IP monitoring, new business models, licensing generated IP. Say you created an intellectual property through Gen AI and you are licensing it to others. That could be for AI generated content, new revenue streams, collaborative innovation, and so forth, right? So the opportunities are many, but the challenges are concerning, as I mentioned at the start. And what could be the challenges? Ownership and authorship, quality and originality, because now that
Right.
is
Right.
questionable, and ethical and moral concerns, which is at the heart of these texts, right? Ambiguity in IP ownership, determining who owns the IP when it is generated by AI is complex. Question also arise about whether the AI developer, user, or the AI itself, the models itself should hold the rights. Legal frameworks, current IP laws may not be adequately addressing the nuances of AI generated content. So now that becomes a challenge. There needs to be framework that markets can adhere to, right? The same thing is with quality and originality, right? The sheer volume of AI content could overwhelm these offices, intellectual IP offices, USPTO, PCT, and other patent bodies all over the world, making it challenging to ensure that patents, trademarks, copyrights, they meet the necessary standards of originality and quality, because then these agencies also have to think, how are we going to define that, right? That the same way plagiarism and infringement, right? Gen AI systems are built on large language learning models. We call them as LLMs, which in turn are learning from existing websites, databases, networks, Google, Reddit, and all, right?
Right.
Which raise concerns about inadvertent plagiarism or IP infringement, right? That no, they are not stealing someone's IP, but they are using the data as a source. So I call that as inadvertent plagiarism, right? And now this will remain that concern, right? Ethical and moral concerns. I think we all are aware how AI system can perpetuate biases present in the data they are trained on, right? Leading to biases, culturally insensitive content, which can result into ethical dilemmas. It also can have an impact on human creators. The proliferation of these AI generated content might undermine the value of human creativity. Though I don't think, I know there is always a debate of AI replacing jobs. I don't think it is entirely correct. I doubt if they can, because see, AI, Gen AI, they all need content. So someone has to create the content. And I don't think that content is going to get substituted. Where it does get little challenging is in terms of content creation, content marketing. Those tasks will get automated more efficient. So I do agree that that is going to be a challenge, but I don't think it will replace humans entirely. I mean, it's a good thing to think about all of these things, but I don't think it's entirely plausible, at least as of today. And the same thing happens with enforcement and protection, right? How do you enforce these kinds of Gen AI based intellectual property, trademarks, or copyrights, right? What will you do in case of violations and infringement? The same thing is with the international IP issues. The global nature of AI will complicate IP enforcement across borders. You build an IP which is over here in this particular country and someone is infringing it other place using AI-based tech. How are you now going to, let's just call, hash it out in legal courts and channels, right? So I think we are in for interesting times. I also think regulatory agencies and legal enforcement, law enforcement agencies will have to step up the plate and create more sustainable frameworks.
Wow. Mr. Shah, as these technologies evolve, they're increasingly becoming central to boardroom discussions.
Very true.
With companies rapidly investing in AI, generative AI, and others, there
Correct.
is a concern about potential failures in meeting ROI or proper deployment.
Correct.
How should companies and board members approach these technologies to drive growth in a highly competitive market?
You know, Rajesh, so boardroom, right? And boardroom discussions, like I said, are going to be very critical for businesses to compete, right? For businesses to stay ahead of the curve. It's going to begin with boardroom and obviously company management, C-level executives, they have to take a call, right? And I think that companies and board members should approach emerging technologies with a strategic mindset, balancing ambition with pragmatism. What I
Right,
mean by this is what is doable and what is not requires internal assessment. Okay. These technologies, markets are evolving, and thus you may not be able to rely on the external resources entirely. They may provide you a benchmark and a platform for stimulating thoughts and curiosities, but you would need to balance again ambition with pragmatism. Yeah. And this can be done by focusing on alignment with business goals, that
hmm,
GenAI has lots of potential. What are my business goals for my future growth of the organization? How can I make that? Managing risks, investing in talent. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of skilled talents. Today we are hearing that people in, US, Europe, in India, and other places where prompt engineers are now in demand, huge demand for Gen
right,
AI and others while using these chat GPTs and whatnot. And these kinds of talents, and there are more, whether it's with large language learning models, machine learning, and all. I'm just giving it this as an example. Getting these kinds of talents into the boardrooms is where leaders will be able to actually visualize the potential of things and correlate that with how they can implement it in their organizations. Okay.
absolutely,
Investing
absolutely,
in this kind of talent rather than just keeping it in closed door with leaders and thinking whether we should work externally and all, right? Bring a
right,
consulting
right.
firm, independent consultant, they can guide. I think that invest in talent, bring people on board in the organizations that have done meaningful work, and build a strategy around that, right? So investing in talent, and of course in companies fostering a culture of continuous learning where internal team members, employees, and all are gaining these skills, working on sort of capstone projects and learning out the new applications and going to management. Hey, we learned something new and we think that this is worth trying it out. So talent upskilling and getting relevant talent are as important as managing risks and goals, right? The key again is going to be adaptive, be customer focused, right? Be opportunity assessor, that how do I leverage this? How does it benefit my customer, end user, and all, right? And ensure that technology investments deliver the tangible business value, right? So I think strategic alignment and clarity is very important. Gen AI has now been proven well enough in improving operational efficiencies and productivity of
Hmm.
employees and teams, right? By automating tasks, bringing in more insights, reducing your time to research and all, right? But this, I think with Gen AI, I sort of want to call this as a low-hanging fruit, okay? The where it differs, and it is still a subject of research, is applied Gen AI. How do I
Okay,
apply Gen AI in pharma, life sciences, stem cell, cancer research, drug discovery, um, engineering, constructions, futuristic technologies? These applied Gen AI is where I feel the more potential is, and this is where I think you require teams that are able to do that, right? Internal research teams and talent. I think the other parts are, obviously focus on use cases, which I covered. Risk management, realistic expectations, that even if you try and you have done your homework, there may be some setbacks until you find a common way out, right?
hmm,
It
hmm,
will require time. So realistic expectations and planning for, the unknowns, right? Trying to know the unknowns. I know it sounds like an oxymoron. Manage expectations, invest in talent, build in-house expertise, I do think. And obviously governance framework, ethical considerations and making sure that we as organizations and leaders are sincerely implementing privacy or ethics or anything into it that creates a sustainable atmosphere. And then, collaboration and other things are involved. But I think these are the key ones that I think are
Right,
worthy
right,
of
right, Mr.
thoughts
Shah.
and ideas.
Uh, It's great to hear your insights on how companies and boards should be navigating through these technologies in order to drive growth and achieve ROI in such a competitive landscape, Mr. Shah. Unfortunately, we are now at the end of the discussion.
Uh-huh.
So coming on to the last question of this session. As you work towards your goal of joining a board of directors, it's essential to have a solid understanding of corporate governance. How has Directors Institute enhanced your understanding to better prepare you for this role?
Rajesh, I'll put it this way. Even after 18, 20 years of investments, managing businesses and experience, Directors Institute's learning and the focus was an eye opener for me, to say
Mhm,
the least. Okay. Having
mhm.
managed corporate governance, when you make these large ticket sizes and those things, you obviously have frameworks, practices, channels, and checks. But through them, through this course and all, I learned a lot, not just about corporate governance and, SRCs, audit committees, and all those were
Right,
necessary frameworks and they are
right.
applicable globally. But the insights that I got through them and how corporates, businesses have implemented, how these rules and frameworks, corporate governance, and all are changing was, like I said, I really enjoyed it. I found it very valuable. And as a leader, when you are, as I mentioned earlier at the start of our discussions, that leaders have very few alternatives and options to seek mentorship and guidance, right? And when
Right.
you have this kind of course, which is not just geared towards getting licenses or certifications, but rather towards real world learnings, is what we as leaders would always yearn or desire for, right? And I think Directors Institute did a fantastic job. The content, the curriculum, the speaker sessions from incredibly reputed leaders in India, US, and other places, right? Their insights, the board members'
Mhm.
insights on what happens inside the boardroom, how things work. Those were personally to me more valuable in envisioning, seeing the real world situations, because it's one thing to take a certification, license, degrees, and all, and it's another thing to see its real world implementation, which is really clean, transparent, and as accurate as it can get, right? So
Completely
from
agreed.
from the coursework and from the real world experiences, these sessions, webinars, I think they were very meaningful, insightful, and I truly enjoyed them. And they give you not just a perspective on one particular country, they give
Mhm,
you a perspective on the US markets, UK,
mhm.
Europe markets, Asian, India, China. So wherever, Middle East and all, wherever you want to consider being a board member, it helped you understand the subtle differences in corporate governance practices in these countries, whether they are driven by public, private market concerns, regulatory concerns, and those things become more meaningful when you are speaking with board members or C-level executives. You actually understand what those frameworks are without having to look up on internet, because now you didn't get just one time thing. Over the period of this course and session, you learned so many things, so many examples and all. So it makes you a very practical board member, and where you can see the future in the boardrooms, meetings, and other aspects, right? So overall, a fantastic experience.
Great, 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 Mr. Shah. Your candid response is much, much appreciated. And thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us, sir. With your expertise and commitment, you are destined for even greater success that I personally feel, apart from all the knowledge that you carry, sir. And after today's session, I'm confident you will be a continued source of inspiration for our viewers as well. Thank you very much for joining this podcast, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rajesh, for hosting me on this show and platform. Thank you, Directors Institute. And I'm glad, and I really hope our audience and viewers would enjoy this session as well. Thank you again for fantastic questions, insights. Truly enjoyed our discussions. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, sir. Have a great day.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you, sir.